One is a campy parody of American Spectacle. The other is a very, very, very dark parody of American Spectacle. Death Race 2000. They remade it. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of They Remade It. I'm your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
You get more and more jubilant every time you say that, it feels like. By the end of a couple of years, it could be like, and my name's Jacob!
I'm happy to be here.
Yay.
I'm excited.
Thank goodness. And I am also happy. Which one of us tells the truth and which one of us tells lies? Haha!
Yes, it's a tricky, treacherous riddle that we've imposed.
The sad fact is that we just both tell half-truths, so it just kind of evens out.
I sort of lie by omission. I figure if I'm not directly telling you the lie, I'm just leaving out information, then it's probably fine. And then when you come back later and you say, "Hey, why didn't you tell me?" It's like, well, it didn't seem important at the time.
And I usually just have bad information, so I wasn't knowingly lying. I was just telling you something objectively wrong.
That's the most frustrating shit. By ignorance. It's like, well, I mean, if we want to get right down to it, I probably shouldn't be telling anybody anything, because how do I know that I know something? Other than I think that I know it.
Truly, why do we even try to communicate with anybody? What are we doing here today?
I forgot. You stumped me.
Yeah. Why even try? Let's just go about our business. Just move on with our lives.
It'd probably be easier. I got some shit to clean.
Yeah. Modern adult shit, you know. But I'm also a procrastinator, so what have you been watching?
That sounds like a perfect lead-in for you to tell me what you've been doing, but it's like, well, I've been procrastinating, so what have you been procrastinating on? It's like, okay.
We'll get to draw it out that way.
What are you doing instead of working? I figure I will go into it. Sure, why not? I have a couple things here, some new, some old, some not even movies. But as usual, I've been playing a couple of things, but probably the most recent, I went ahead and completed Stray, which came out 2 weeks ago, as of this recording? I don't quite remember, because I had already gotten a hold of it before it came out. I just couldn't download it, so I don't remember when it came out. But anyways, went ahead and did that. It's pretty good. It's enjoyable, and I chalk a lot of that up to how relatively short it is. I was able to beat the whole game regularly in about 5 hours, and then an additional 3 to 4. I'll say 4 to go back and clean up stuff, and then to do the 2 hour or less speed run to get that final trophy, because I did this on PS5. Fairly short, and that's probably the best thing for it, because a lot of what went into the desire for a lot of people to play this game was playing as realistic cat in this specialized setting. It's like a cat simulator, but it's not structured like other gimmick simulators. Yeah. Unfortunately, that only goes so far. And like I said, the length really helped, because the last 20 or so minutes of the game, I was like, is this really still going? How much more can I put up with this? Like, my patience started to wear a little thin, and that was right as I was getting to the end of the game. So I was like, you know what? Kudos to you for getting me in and getting me out. You know what I mean?
That's fair. I just like it because kitty.
Yeah, I mean that's why most people like it, and that's the aspects that I liked of it. Realistic cat behavior. Sometimes the cat will do things while you're playing, and it sort of you get confused. You're like, why are you? I'm not telling you to do that. And then it's like, oh, it's like a 5-second cat is being cat. That honestly elevates a lot of it. That elevates a lot of the gameplay. So, but yeah, that's Stray. I definitely recommend it to folks, just because I had a good time with it. Besides that, I continued with the Ghibli 2022 fest that they're doing, and saw Kiki's Delivery Service again, but this time in theaters. It's interesting. I think I brought up Mononoke and Ponyo when I saw them, but I skipped over the one in June, which was The Cat Returns. I did see it in theaters, but I completely forgot to mention it on the show because it was my first time seeing it, and my reaction was like, that's fine. Like, it wasn't much of anything. But going back to form with Kiki, which I haven't officially ranked these movies, but it's probably like my third or so on that list after Mononoke and Spirited Away, which I'll be revisiting in November. It's still a lot of fun. It's enjoyable. It's a little cool story about growing up and maturing as a young adult. And I think this was the first time I'd seen the dub version of this. And I didn't know the late Phil Hartman, who we last discussed on our Jingle All the Way episode last year, actually voices her cat in the dub. I didn't know that, which was a little distracting, but it was also fun because it was a bunch of Phil Hartman dialogue that I had not heard before, and he's always a blast to listen to, even though some of the lines that they did in the dub translation and they gave to him were kind of cringeworthy. I was like, oh god, that's not funny.
I mean, that's gonna be any dub ultimately. So,
unless you pulled the entire audience that was surrounding me because it was a pretty packed theater, they thought it was uproariously hilarious. So, minority there. But that I saw that, and then 2 new movies I ended up seeing. I don't think I mentioned this on the show, so correct me if I did. But I saw Jordan Peele's new movie Nope, which we discussed at the last year's end of year show since it had been coming up.
Yep. I don't think you mentioned it last time, no.
Okay, perfect. So it's funny. I have not seen Us, but I did see Get Out. And a lot of the discourse for Nope online is that it's still pretty good, but it's probably the weakest of his movies, which, again, have not seen Us, but I actually like Nope more than I like Get Out.
Yeah, I was going to say, the consensus I had been seeing seemed like it was the opposite. It seemed like everyone loved this one the most. Or at the very least, like, this one was like kind of his freshest idea.
Well, certainly freshest, but I've been seeing a lot of complaints about the structure and people saying there's too many ideas packed into this one movie. It's pretty much been middling, and yeah, most of the people I've been seeing have been mentioning that it's his weakest, though a lot of that is coming, I guess, specifically from Letterboxd, just because that's primarily what I use to log all my stuff, and I don't really use a lot of social media, so maybe discourse is different elsewhere. I think there's a lot of ideas that are sort of thrown into this, and it can get confusing at times, but they actually intertwine fairly well, and it's one of those movies where after the fact I was sort of piecing things together because the movie didn't do it for me, thankfully, where it's like, oh, that's the reason that scene was there at the beginning, was to illustrate a point that they came back to later, sort of the overall theme of animals and trying to tame animals, which is present throughout all the trailers, even the really vague ones. So
yeah, and like
not necessarily spoiling anything there.
Yeah, and like that's kind of been the general thing I've seen, because I've seen a lot of the discourse. I still haven't seen it, but I want to. But I've seen a lot of the discourse bringing up the fact of like people clearly just trying to take everything there at immediate face value and just being confused. And it's like, no, you have to look for themes, like at least a little. Like this isn't like some shit like a fucking French avant-garde film. Like you can just look into it, be slightly beyond surface level, and you'll figure it out. Like that's it. It's not that hard.
Right. It's not like why did that character have that backstory, and why was it like 10 minutes of the movie? Well, if you paid attention, it fits in with the general message that the movie's going for. It combines with everything else. It
fits in with the general message. It might influence the character's like actions later on. It like all these different things. Like you have to assume if it's in the movie, it's in it for a reason. Use your fucking head. Like start making jumps to conclusions if you have to, because that's how you find the fun shit.
Yeah.
Jordan Peele doesn't like people to like have their hand held going through his movies. He's just like, no, this is just where it is, and it's cool. Shut the fuck up and learn.
Yeah. When did we lose this? And that's a rhetorical question because I know that's a can of worms. But it's like, when did we lose the ability to just think and, discuss?
I mean, I'd say Joss Whedon, but that's a pretty heavy topic.
Right. Yeah. So we'll avoid it. I don't know. I have not been able to turn my brain off to watch a movie in well over a decade. So, but at any rate, I have one last thing to talk about, and that's just because I saw it in theaters last night. And that is Bullet Train, the action comedy that I think actually just premiered yesterday.
I only just saw like a teaser trailer for it. I hadn't even known about it until a couple days ago.
Oh yeah, I've been getting, because I've been going to the theater bi-weekly, I've been getting trailers for it for a couple of months. And I was like, you know what? That looks fun enough. I'm not a big Brad Pitt guy, but it looks fun. I'll go see it. And it's pretty good. It's a solid B. There's a couple of things that I don't really like, movie making mechanics that are thrown in there that I think could have been avoided. And it's a lot of my general qualms that I have with movies, especially modern movies, that comes up constantly on this podcast is directors not trusting the audience and sort of holding their hand. There's a couple of flashbacks in the movie to establish backstories of characters, and it's like, okay, that's fine, you know, it's a storytelling mechanic, and I'm sort of getting insight into this world. But then in the second half of the movie, you can really feel that the director, which was David Leitch, I don't know how to pronounce that, but he it feels like he's very smug and doesn't know that the audience comprehends all the twists and, you know, how everything is sort of connecting to one another. So he constantly is using flashbacks to things we've already seen. And that really bothers me because it just feels like a waste of film.
Yeah.
And
like I can
there's
see
a
doing
fair
it.
amount of that.
I can see doing at least a little, because, like, you know, at the end of the day, you gotta give at least some amount of lead, but don't like start just redoing whole scenes and shit like that. Because I can kind of imagine exactly what you mean. But yeah, it's yeah, going from nope right to that is, I'm sure, is a pretty jarring shift.
Actually, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, because it's like, well, on the one hand, you have a very skilled director who knows about like narrative flow and kind of like building up mystery and having different themes, and then you have an action movie director trying to add fucking like mystery and intrigue into the mix of things.
Right. And you can feel it being very clever. Like, oh, I get it. Yeah, that was very smart what you just did. And I don't know how much of this comes from the original source material, because I know it was based on a Japanese book called Maria Beetle or something like that. So I don't know how heavily this adaptation sways from that. But besides that, and some really weird CGI in the last 10 minutes, which even in the theater, I was like, ugh, that's kind of disgusting for 2022. But overall, I don't think the film's that bad. It's actually fairly funny, and I think it manages to do that because it's not. Maybe I'm just spoiled now, because most modern comedies do rely on very quippy style dialogue, and this movie's able to do comedy without a lot of that. Don't get me wrong, it's still there occasionally because you have to, but it's not overbearing at the very least.
Quips on their own aren't inherently bad. It's just when you think the only key to comedy is quipping.
And the problem is that is basically like 90% of movie comedy anymore. Yeah. Is that so? It's kind of turned around into being like, it's almost spoiled the entire concept, you know. But
I will not launch into a Marvel like rage fest. I will not launch into a Marvel rage fest.
That's pretty much it. It's a pretty good movie. It has some funny moments. I think Aaron Taylor Johnson and Brian Tyree Henry, they play like these like twins, and they're kind of supposed to be secondary characters or sort of tertiary antagonists in the movie, but I think they're kind of the heart of the whole thing, and they really carried the picture. But Brad Pitt wasn't terrible. A lot of stuff he's in, I think he's either wooden or he's too hammy. There's no in between, but I was surprised this was kind of a middle of the road. I was like, huh, okay. Still, you know, surprised me after all this time. But yeah, that's Bullet Train, and that is it for my list.
My list is going to be pretty short again. Not for really any particular reason, just been doing other shit. I will say, I actually did join you inadvertently with the Ghibli Fest, because Hannah and I also went to go see Kiki's.
Nice.
Yeah, we actually went to go see it for her birthday, and I hadn't seen it before, so.
I did not know that.
Yep, I had not seen it. I haven't seen most of Ghibli's shit, actually. I'm trying to kind of catch up with all that. But yeah, no, I loved it. I kind of love that sort of like setup, that, you know, whole kind of, for lack of a better term, you know, young kid has plucky attitude and is able to set up their own business, essentially. Like, it's just kind of like, I just think that's fun. I thought there was a lot to love about it. Other than that, as far as other films, oh shit, I don't honestly think I've seen any other major films right now. Hannah and I are still watching our shows on there's the Dropout app with College Humor. We're still watching like their show, their Dungeons and Dragons show, Dimension 20. We're still watching episodes on there. Otherwise, as far as games, I also played through Stray, because, you know, nice. Cats. I love cats, and I adored it, and the ending made me extremely sad. And, you know, I had to go back and play through it more. I really do hope it would be cool if they kind of did some level of, if not DLC, at least just kind of like varied play styles to add in, like, with stuff that you've done by the end. Like, maybe if you could like play around back out in the outside world again, because, you know, the game predominantly takes place in this like underground city, and it'd be kind of cool to see certain elements kind of change, kind of like see how everything can interact with like some of the actions you pulled. I won't spoil anything, obviously, but it'd be kind of nice to see if they kind of came back to say like small things, like they added stuff for like in the vein of like those silly like animal simulator games like Untitled Goose Game and that sort of thing. They kind of come back in, add some little bits and pieces. Because the story is pretty much good. Like I don't want them to try and do like a sequel thing or anything unless they do something like extravagantly different. But it's still be nice to kind of have another reason to come back to it. Other than that, the only other major thing I've done, and I definitely a major thing, I went and bit the bullet and I got Elden Ring.
I saw you playing that yesterday as I was
Yeah,
finishing up Stray.
yep. I've been trying to hold off for a while with the hopes of getting a PS5, and just like as you know, the shortages continue to stretch into the future, which I have no idea if I'll ever actually actively try to get one. At least not until finances are very settled. I just kind of looked it up online, just being like, "Hey, is it worth it to do it on the PS4? Like, is it really janky or anything?" And people are all like, "Oh, no, it works fine." And then even if you buy it on PlayStation 4, you should get the free upgrade whenever you have the PS5, so you can just download it for free on there. And I was like, "Cool, I'm buying it," and I love it because it's cool. I've approximately played one other specifically From Software Souls game, and it was the time when it was my 21st birthday, and we were doing it, and I was taking shots every time I died with you guys. That is the only other time I played, and I think this is actually a really good intro for people who might be kind of intimidated for the other series, because like it's definitely a lot more freeform. It lets you kind of take things at your own pace, and I've been able to learn it in a much more freeform way that I was able actually to start enjoying it rather than just like run into it, arms flailing, and then just get my shit wrecked, and then just get turned off the whole series. Because that's kind of how I felt when I first played it. You know, alcohol aside, it just felt kind of unfair. And now I've gotten pretty good at it. And so, I mean, I say pretty. I've gotten used to the mechanics enough that I can at least hold my own. But yeah, no, it's been a hell of a time. I've been playing it for about like, I don't know, 20 to 30 hours by now, which I think is about, you know, what was called dipping your toe into the water.
Yeah.
Because goodness gracious, that map keeps getting bigger.
I was talking to a friend about it because he has gotten back into it and has been playing it a lot. I was like, you know what? I still need to go back because I dropped it. Other things were coming up. I literally think the reason I dropped it is because Kirby and the Forgotten Lands came out and I really wanted to play it. So I was like, all right, I'll put you aside for now. And I started playing that. And then I just have not gone back. But I put 25 to 30 hours into the game and never really fought any big bosses or even sought out any big bosses. I just liked exploring and looking at all the different environments. That was sort of my favorite part. And it's like, do I need to go back and like fight all the bosses? Maybe I'll do that sometime. But I think that my favorite part has been explored.
Yeah, I definitely like a fair amount of both. I've seen a lot of people actually complain about the exploration, saying that it kind of just breaks up the core gameplay loop for the game. And I've loved it. I love kind of just running around seeing shit, like kind of just got running over random stuff happening. I'm like, oh, cool. And I get to like piece together lore bits, as bad as I am at piecing together lore, because my goodness gracious.
Right.
But this one still seems infinitely easier to understand than in fucking like Dark Souls and like Bloodborne and shit. Because it's like, it seems like I feel like you can see more of J.R.R. Martin's kind of hand in things, because it seems like a bit more of a straightforward, more Western style story at times, or at least some of the like background elements. Because like I'll see someone playing like Demon Souls and they'll talk to an NPC who will tell them what is apparently super crucial information, and it is the most backwards sounding, like full of flowery language bullshit I have ever seen. And I'm like, they're doing this on purpose. This is objectively indecipherable. Then I come into this where it's basically like, I'm a warrior here and I have found this village that is being plagued by some sort of like fear of madness, and also these assholes who are trying to kill everybody that are living here. Please come help me kill them. I'm like, cool. That is straightforward. I am good with that. That is, you're a lady dressed up like Conan the Barbarian. I am cool with all this.
Thank you. That's all I've wanted.
Yeah. It's still indecipherable as shit when you get to the wider lore, but the play-by-play stuff, pretty easy. I'm fine with that.
Yep, and not to rehash it, but I've played a handful of other Souls games in the past, but never for too terribly long, and this is the first one where I like the controls. Or I liked the controls. It's been so many months now, but they never felt stilted or weird. I always had that problem with other Souls games, and it prevented me from getting too far into them, but Elden Ring feels just right.
Yeah, that's kind of always been my issue with like a lot of those more hardcore games, a lot of those like, I guess like sometimes Japanese games in general where the control schemes can just seem a bit too wonky to really enjoy. That's what really prevented me from liking Shadow of the Colossus more, despite, you know, its quality. But yeah, I definitely agree. This one's a lot more, this one feels a lot more user-friendly. It can still get kind of bogged down with a lot of shit. Like there's all these items and shit you can use. Meanwhile, I'm just like, I will run in here with my 2 swords, and by the time I run out, everything between me and the other door better be dead.
That's how Whenever we used to play RPG games in college or things like that, there were like 4-player games. We would just be in the hub world or whatever, and I would be waiting and waiting and waiting to start a mission because I'm not the type of person who likes excessive crafting or min-maxing or anything like that. I'm like, I don't know, I like this gun. It doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but I like that it's automatic and I don't have to aim it. Like it's, I don't like to get bogged down with too many options. And there's different playstyle for everybody, but I definitely feel that.
I had these cool swords, and now I've been handed something even cooler. I'm going to use the cool thing now. I don't care if it's objectively a bit less damage. It's cool. I'm just going to run in there and spam random attacks and hope for the fucking best. I will learn to dodge roll properly later. But yeah, no, it's been a blast. I've loved it quite a lot. There's only been a few moments of frustration. It's mainly just because of like, I think mainly the horse combat's kind of dull, and there's a shocking amount of enemies that seem impossible to kill without horse combat. So. Like, there's so many fucking dragons in this game. Like, every time I see a new one, I'm like, God fucking hell. I don't want to have to just run by and do drive-bys with a fucking flail again.
I mean, dragons tend to be fairly dull anyway. That's like yeah. I don't want to never mind. I was about to launch into a whole tirade about, like, dragons in Skyrim, and that being, like, one of my big issues with that game, but nah. I don't even care enough for that.
They're dragons. Who gives a shit?
What if instead of a horse, you used a car?
What if instead of dragons, it was fascism? And privatized prisons in the remakes case. I don't know, man. Fucking, it's hard to do synopses on this. It's Death Race 2000. So that horrible segue aside, we'll jump right into the 1975 Death Race 2000 that is directed by Paul Bartel, screenplay by Robert Thorne and Charles B. Griffith, and it is based on a short story by Ib Melchior. And going down with the main cast list, we have David Carradine as Frankenstein. We have Simone Griffith as Annie Smith. We have Sylvester Stallone as Machine Gun Joe Viterbo. Mary Warnov as Jane Calamity Jane Kelly. Roberta Collins as Matilda the Hun. Martin Cove as Ray Nero the Hero Lonigan, Louisa Mortiz as Mira, Joe's navigator, and Don Steele as Junior Bruce, the race announcer, Joyce Jameson as Grace Pander, another race announcer, Carl Benson as Harold, another race announcer, and Sandy McCallum as Mr. President. Going into the plot synopsis, after the quote-unquote world crash of 1979, massive civil unrest and economic ruin occurs in the United States. The United States government is reconstructed into a totalitarian regime under martial law. To pacify the population, the government has created the Transcontinental Road Race, where a group of drivers race across the country in their high-powered cars, and which is famous for violence, gore, and innocent pedestrians being struck and killed for bonus points. In the year 2000, 5 drivers in the 20th annual race, who all adhere to professional wrestling-style personas and drive appropriately themed cars, include Frankenstein, the mysterious black garb champion and national hero, Machine Gun Joe Viterbo, a Chicago tough guy gangster, Calamity Jane, a cowgirl, Matilda the Hun, a neo-Nazi, and Nero the Hero, a Roman gladiator. Machine Gun Joe Viterbo, the second-place champion, is most determined of all to defeat Frankenstein himself and win the race. Meanwhile, a resistance group led by one Thomasina Paine, a supposed descendant of the 1970s American Revolutionary War hero Thomas Paine, plans to rebel against the regime, currently led by a man only referred to as Mr. President, by sabotaging the race, killing most of the drivers, and taking Frankenstein hostage as leverage against Mr. President. The group is assisted by Paine's great-granddaughter Annie Smith, Frankenstein's own navigator. She plans to lure him into an ambush in order to have him replaced by a double. Despite a pirated national broadcast made by Miss Paine herself, the resistance disruption of the race is covered up by the government and instead blamed on the French, who are blamed for ruining the country's economy and telephone system, apparently. At first, the resistance plan seems to bear fruit. Nero the Hero was killed when a quote-unquote decoy baby, he runs over for extra points, turns out to be a bomb. Matilda the Hun drives off a cliff while following a fake detour sign set up by the resistance, and Calamity Jane, who witnessed Matilda the Hun's death, inadvertently drives over a landmine. This leaves only Frankenstein and Machine Gun Joe in the race. As Frankenstein nonchalantly survives every attempt made on his life during the race, Annie comes to discover Frankenstein's mask and disfigured face are merely a disguise. He is, in fact, one of a number of random wards of the state who are trained exclusively to race under that specific identity, and each time they die or are brutally mutilated, they are secretly replaced so that Frankenstein appears to be indestructible, and is instead reconstructed between every race. The current Frankenstein reveals to Annie his own plan to actually kill Mr. President. When he wins the race and shakes hands with Mr. President, he will detonate a grenade which has been implanted in the prosthesis of his right hand. However, the plan goes awry when Machine Gun Joe Viterbo attacks Frankenstein and Annie and is forced to kill him using Frankenstein's hand grenade, quote-unquote. Having successfully outmaneuvered both the rival drivers and the resistance, Frankenstein is declared the winner of the race, although he is wounded and unable to carry out his original hand grenade attack plan. Annie instead dons the Frankenstein costume and plans to stab Mr. President while standing in for Frankenstein on the winner's podium. Before she is able to do so, however, Thomasina shoots the fake Frankenstein, convinced that he had actually killed Annie earlier in the race. The real Frankenstein takes advantage of the confusion and rams Mr. President's stage with his car, finally fulfilling his lifelong desire to kill him. Frankenstein becomes new president and marries Annie, like kind of all just off screen apparently. Either that or it's like a fucking that's a Marshall thing. You kill the president, you become the president. Anyway, he also marries Annie and appoints Thomasina as the Minister of Home Security to rebuild the state and dissolve the dictatorship. Junior Bruce, the high energy announcer for the Transcontinental Road Race, opposes the race's abolition and impertinently claims that the public needs performances of violence. Annoyed by his complaints, Frankenstein hits Bruce with his car and drives off with Annie to the cheers and applause of the crowd. Because that's not like ironic and immediately going against all the things you just said, but you know what? It's like hoisted by your own petard and that sort of thing, whatever the fuck. Also, I should also say, I forgot to mention her before, this Miss Thomasina Payne is actually played by Harriet Medine. Now, jumping over to the complete other end of the spectrum, with the Death Race 2000 being a very campy and very much like not taking itself too seriously parody, but also taking itself very seriously, we jump over to the very dark version from 2008 of just Death Race. This was directed, screenplay written by, and story by Paul W.S. Anderson, and is once again based on the original Death Race 2000 and based on the short story The Racer by Ib Melchior. Going down the major cast list, we have Jason Statham as Jensen Garner Ames, who plays Frankenstein, Joan Allen as Claire Hennessy, Tyrese Gibson as Joseph Machine Gun Joe Mason, Ian McShane as Coach, Natalie Martinez as Case, Max Ryan as Slovo Pachenko, Jason Clarke as Mr. Ulrich, Bridget Kohler as List, Jacob Vargas as Gunner. Oh, it actually had, and as an actual little fun fact, in the introduction of the film, we see the original Frankenstein. He is actually voiced over by David Carradine again, reprising his role from the original, but just as a brief cameo. Jumping into this one's synopses, in 2012, the collapse of the U.S. economy and the subsequent increase in crime rates leads to the rise of privatized prisons. One such prison is Terminal Island Penitentiary, whose warden, Claire Hennessy, earns profits from broadcasting The Death Race, a vehicular combat racing series online. Throughout the season, Terminal Island inmates battle each other in specially modified cars on a track cut into the ground, with the goal of each of them of winning 5 total races, which would then earn them their freedom. Towards the end of a race, a masked driver nicknamed Frankenstein is nearing the finish line, pursued by his rival Machine Gun Joe. His navigator, Case, reports that all of his defensive equipment has malfunctioned. Against her protests, Frankenstein refuses to let Joe finish first. Case ejects herself out of the car just before Joe destroys the car as it crosses the finish line. Sometime after this, industrial worker and ex-con Jason Ames struggles to support his family. When the steel mill he works at is closed down, he returns home to his wife Susie and their newborn daughter, Piper. Suddenly after, a masked assailant knocks him unconscious. Jensen wakes up with a bloody knife in his hand, Susie dead nearby, and policemen storming into his home and arresting him, all while witnessing the masked assailant do a finger gun motion towards him before leaving the building. Jensen is soon after sentenced to life imprisonment, while Piper is placed into foster care. 6 months later, Jensen is transferred to Terminal Island Prison. Hennessy's second-in-command, Ulrich, calls Jensen to her office. She tells him that Frankenstein had actually died from the injuries that he had received at the end of the previous race, and offers to let Jensen go free if he drives Frankenstein's car in one more race, donning his mask so no one knows the difference in the driver. Jensen accepts the offer and meets Frankenstein's maintenance crew, consisting of Coach, Gunner, and Lists. They explained it to Jensen that Hennessy wants him to become Frankenstein to rebuild the profits and the audience of the Death Race, which had halved after the disappearance of Frankenstein. On the first day of the 3-day race, Jensen meets Case. During the race, his vehicle's defense system again mysteriously malfunctions. Jensen is distracted and blindsided by Machine Gun Joe when he sees Pachenko perform the same handgun gesture at him as the masked assailant, causing Jensen to realize it was Pachenko who had killed his wife. Jensen confronts Pachenko and attacks him after the race, prompting Pachenko to admit Hennessy ordered him to frame Jensen so that she could have a replacement for Frankenstein. On the second day, Jensen threatens to eject Case unless she tells the truth about the malfunctions. Case admits she sabotaged Frankenstein's car in order to keep him from winning and leaving the Death Race on his 5th and final race, in exchange for her own early release papers. Jensen makes Pachenko's car slam it headlong into a concrete barrier, and he then exits the car and breaks Pachenko's neck, promising to go after Hennessy next. He and Joe then collaborate to destroy a massive multi-weapon tanker truck added to boost the ratings further, because that just kind of got added into the middle and then it was just kind of gone. It's honestly kind of inconsequential. By the end of the second race day, all racers except for Jensen and Joe have been killed. Hennessy orders Ulrich to plant a bomb underneath Jensen's car in case he wins, knowing she can always find another person to impersonate Frankenstein. Jensen, who has realized Hennessy never intended to let anyone win their freedom from the start, approaches Joe after the race, suggesting that they talk. On the final race, Jensen and Joe collaborate again, destroying and driving through a wall that had been weakened on the first day of racing. Hennessy tries to activate the bomb under the car, but unknowingly it had been removed and disassembled by Coach the previous evening. She orders helicopters to pursue, though Jensen had jumped out of the car and Case takes his place and is captured in his stead. Meanwhile, Joe and Jensen manage to escape out onto a freight train that evening. Hennessy later opens up a present that was supposedly sent to her due to her record-breaking ratings, finding instead there to be the bomb that she had planted under Jensen's car. Coach detonates the bomb, killing both Hennessy and Ulrich. 6 months later, Joe and Jensen, reunited with Piper, are working in Mexico as mechanics and are soon then reunited with Case. That's a whole lot. My goodness gracious.
There's a number. There's a ton happening, even if it doesn't feel like it, So
yeah, which I think that's a good sign for a movie, is that it doesn't necessarily feel like a lot's happening when you watch it, but then when you think back on it, you're like, oh wait, a lot was going on.
As long as you're able to retain it.
Yeah, fair enough. That's better than most movies these days.
Right. Well, that's true.
And back in the day, now that I think about it, with a lot of the ones we've seen.
And I'm sure we'll get to that more.
Yeah.
In actual conversation. But that's right. It's circling time. That's my catchphrase. Okay, a couple bits here. The first two individuals that we're going to cover are kind of obvious, more or less, because of Roger Corman. His school of acting and his producing of Death Race 2000. What's another movie that he produced that we've covered? Why, The Little Shop of Horrors from 1960, of course. And I think he also directed it. I wish I had that on hand. That sounds right. But
they feel odd. They feel like odd spiritual brothers now that I think about it.
Yes. Oh, a lot of his films have very similar themes and a lot of familiar faces, that were brought up in his school of acting and directing, like Marty Scorsese and Jack Nicholson and, a ton of people. So, not to go with two individuals directly related to The Departed, that was completely coincidental.
Son of a bitch.
But I literally just came to my mind. I was like, oh, fuck me.
It can't keep getting away with it.
But the first person we have here is Charles B. Griffith, who was an army member with the Resistance in Death Race 2000, and he was the voice of the plant, Audrey Jr., in 1960's The Little Shop of Horrors.
That's fun.
Be added into that is Dick Miller, who I think was in every single Roger Corman picture, and he was also in Gremlins 1 and 2. Joe Dante, another individual who was at the school of Corman. But Dick Miller was a member of the Chicken Gang in Death Race 2000, and he was Burson Fouch in The Little Shop of Horrors.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah, it's been a minute, but I'm sure, if I watch the movie again, I could pick it out. Because, Dick Miller's recognizable. He's got a recognizable face, so... I just don't
have a recognizable name, I'll tell that.
Fair. Next up, we have John Landis. He was one of the mechanics in Death Race 2000. He was also a Muppet performer in 79's The Muppet Movie, and he was the man in the commercial for the 6000 SUX in 1987's RoboCop, a movie that has more than a couple similarities to Death Race 2000, which I'll also be getting into.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be touching on that quite a bit.
Martin Kove was Nero the Hero in Death Race 2000. He was also John Kreese in 84's The Karate Kid. Don't remember that character.
Oh shit! I think that's he's the bad guy karate instructor.
Is he? Was that guy's name? John Kreese?
I guess I didn't know he had a name. But I knew I recognized him from something. But yeah, that's absolutely him. I'm pretty sure.
Damn, I gotta revisit Karate Kid. I gotta put it together. But yes, that is Martin Kove. Now, one of the more obvious ones, and the last one for the 75 picture, Sylvester Stallone was Machine Gun Joe Viterbo, Death Race 2000, and he was Judge Dredd in 1995's Judge Dredd.
Fully, I know I'll get into it more later, but fully 1000% did not expect to see Sylvester Stallone just roll up in that car. He showed up, I was like, holy shit!
Oh my god!
I was truly just thinking that this movie was just going to be some random thing that had been kind of done up in some capacity, but it was like, oh no, that's a fucking huge name, just right the fuck there. And I know ultimately David Carradine is too, but still.
Right. And I mean, Sly Stallone, he wasn't big at the time, so.
Yeah. I think this was after Rocky, though.
Was it? Was it Rocky like 70, 76 or 77? Maybe not. Maybe that's not true.
76, I'll be damned.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
right before he
yeah.
got his hits in Rocky. Wow.
Yeah.
They got him in quick. Now we have two for Death Race 2008. First is Ian McShane, who was Coach in Death Race 2008. He was also Trevor Rutenholm in 2019's Hellboy, a movie I've mostly forgotten at this point.
Yeah, he's like meant to be Hellboy's like surrogate father.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you're here to remind me of these things.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I like that actor a lot, so that's why I remember.
Fair. That's fair. And then finally, Jason Statham was Jensen Ames, or Frankenstein, or what have you, in Death Race 2008, and he was Handsome Rob in 2003's The Italian Job.
He really did like a lot of like varied roles earlier in the 2000s, but he really did kind of fall into the action hero thing pretty quickly.
Yeah, there's a handful of guys that you could say sort of fit into that pool. And the moment they tried to dip their toe into something else, usually comedy, it backfires and they run back.
Bruce Willis.
Ooh, Bruce Willis.
Which is now kind of sad.
What a shame. Yeah. Go back and listen to our episode on Last Man Standing to hear that depressing information. But,
Hey.
Hey. Always callbacks. Always with the callbacks. But,
Yay. Especially the depressing ones.
Yes, of course. I guess I'll take the reins here for a brief bit.
That would be fantastic, because my throat is clenching the fuck up.
Uh-oh, peanut allergy. Anyways, so I'm going to start off with a brief story, or brief tale, I guess. I have not really been talking about it in what I've been watching, because it's been an ongoing thing, and I don't want to bring it up every time. But something I've recently started doing with my mother, we've been going through The Golden Girls. And a lot of this was recently spurred by Betty White's passing earlier in the year, because she was the last one of the main cast that was alive. Or, that wasn't even earlier in the year, that was the tail end of last year. Anyways, so we've been going through, and recently it was, we finished season 1, now we've been doing season 2. So season 1, partway through, B. Arthur's character is divorced in the series, and she has an ex-husband named Stan, who is a recurring character. And there's one episode most of the way through the first season where his younger wife comes in, who he left B. Arthur for. And I was like, I've seen her before. Where have I seen her? She's not a big name. And I looked it up, and I'll be damned if it wasn't Simone Griffith, who we were just about to talk about in the Death Race episode.
I'll be damned.
Because, of course, I've seen Death Race 75 once before in the past. So I definitely recognized her face, even though she's not like a big name, right? So I found that interesting. But also, the actor who plays her husband, her new husband, B. Arthur's ex, is Herb Edelman, who we recently talked about in the Odd Couple episode, because he plays Murray the cop in that first Odd Couple episode. So,
shit.
One person married to another person, and that's just another full circle. I got you, bitches. I got you. I got you all full circle after the full circle.
Oh my god, fuck, a personal level, a full circle, because of your own experiences. Jesus.
My life is nothing but webs. So yeah, I definitely wanted to make sure I brought that up. So anyways, talking about the movies themselves. So I'm going to come right out of the gate early on, because I have thoughts on this. I like Death Race 2000 the most out of both of these. Just out the gate, and we'll have thoughts on that later. And, given my relation to RoboCop, which I am a big fan of, maybe that's not entirely surprising. Death Race 2008, to hop into it was hard for me to sit through for a lot of it. Even with all the action that was supposedly going on, it felt more confined and constrained in what it was telling. And there were all these scenes cutting back to, this Hennessy woman who was staring at monitors. I'm like, okay, I get it. She's like in a control room. There's not a lot going on here. But it's just a reminder that she's there, I guess. Except for later in the movie, she has some like action items that she calls out. That being said, 10 minutes prior to the end of the movie, suddenly they're in this final race. It's just Joe and Frankenstein, Jason Statham's character. I'll just call him Frankenstein. They're racing, and suddenly this plan that they've put together off screen kind of comes into play. And suddenly I'm engaged. And let me tell you, if the last 10 minutes of Death Race 2008, I was not fully invested in everything that was going on, which was such a wide difference from, watching the rest of the movie. I felt that I definitely had to bring it up. If I talk any negative points on Death Race 2008, let it be known that I was fully invested in these characters I thought I did not give a shit about.
Yeah.
It was just a lot of the things surrounding them and their activities that maybe I wish were a little tighter, or maybe in terms of storytelling, I wish it was looser, and the character interactions were a bit tighter. Perhaps that's it. And maybe my thoughts on that will evolve as the episode goes on and we discuss it. But I wanted it to be known. I did care about these characters. I just didn't know that I did until it came time.
Yeah. I think there's going to be a lot of kind of, because I kind of honestly, I think I have the exact opposite going in with 2000. I like both of these movies, I should say. I don't think either of these movies are objectively bad. I was especially surprised by Death Race 2000. Like, I fully did not expect, because I've seen Death Race from 2008 before, because they've been like revolving it around on like HBO channels for a long ass time. So I just like kept seeing it. So I thought it was fine. I always appreciate it. I fully did not expect the full like 90-degree fucking 180-degree turn that was the original in terms of tone. Because like I alluded to it at the beginning, but the like Death Race 2000 is very much like you said, in the vein of the original RoboCop as far as style. It's very at times camp. It's extremely campy. I'll say that. Like, it's just like these guys rolling up in what look like essentially as a bumper car just kept getting turned more and more into an actual car. Like, just like they're rolling up in cars that look like they belong in a carnival. There are all these like stupid level characters. It's in this like neo-Nazi style, like fascist kind of style, totalitarian America. There's so many moments where it's like they're starting off in the great state of New York, and the first shot out of there is very clearly of like an overshot over California. So it's like, nah. But it's just, it truly is not giving a shit, and it's really fun with how it's doing it. And then versus the 2008 one, which is the epitome of like that super dark, grungy thing that was going on from like late 90s into like really actually about 2008. This was kind of like the last call of it, of like where everything's just like super like kind of muddled and dark looking. It looks like everyone's kind of got like some like coal dust or oil smeared on them or some shit. Everything's like really intense all the time. It's a very big shift that I was not expecting. To get to the point that I was getting at before with the opposite feelings, where the Death Race 2008, it sneaks up on you with like making you give a shit about these characters, because like you kind of just fall into the rhythm of, okay, yeah, driving around, machine guns and shit firing off and everything. And then all of a sudden it like calls back to a moment earlier in the film without, it does it without being like, oh, there's a flashback where we clearly know what their plan is going to be. It just kind of goes, oh, they escaped through the hole from the beginning. And it just shows us like as they do it. And we can't even actually see them truly escape. We just see them pass through a smoke cloud after it hits the wall. And it just shows a shot from earlier in the film, like that's just candidly, like diegetically on a film screen, showing like, oh, right, that wall got super fucked up and they just went with it. That's cool. Like, I give a shit about these characters right now.
Right.
I kind of had the opposite effect in Death Race 2000, where I expected to like the characters more than I ended up liking them, because it definitely builds up a lot of the different things, as these are very kind of nuanced characters, especially Frankenstein's character. And he's definitely got the lion's share of the nuance. But kind of by the end, most characters that you either liked or at least were engaged with are either dead or just kind of like doing something else. The one other racer that they had, Calamity Jane, that seemed to have some sort of heart, just kind of dies. It almost feels like it should be like a comedy bit with it, but just kind of like she goes out into like this field, narrowly misses a mine, starts to back up her car and does like a 3 to 5 point turn and just backs onto it and then blows up. And now the scene's over. It's like, okay, why? It just kind of, it feels like there was a lot of buildup for all that, and like the amount of heart that she actually had going into all this, but no, she's just gone.
It felt like they were trying to build tension on it a bit because she keeps missing it. But also when she gets there, I don't know if she knows specifically that it's a minefield, but she realizes it's a bad place to be, because you can see her look around and there are all these destroyed cars around her. And so yeah. I'm not saying it works necessarily, but I think they're definitely trying to play up tension for this. It's hard to say sympathetic with any of these racer characters that are just mowing down old people and toddlers.
Oh,
but
yeah.
She's one of the more sympathetic. Yeah, she's probably the most sympathetic of the actual racers, just because she displays levels of emotional attachment, at least to her to the other racers. Like the neo-Nazi, she had a rivalry with him and she was definitely gunning for him, but she shows concern and levels of upset with the fact that she plummets off a cliff.
Which, like, you'd think of all the characters that have a heart for it, like, you could maybe skip over that one. Like, we can just, like, hate on the neo-Nazi. That's fine.
And that's kind of... That's some of the core of the issues with that movie, is it just that it's hard to sympathize with any of the characters when they're actively, killing people. Even like you said, Frankenstein, who is supposed to be the protagonist, and, yay, he's the new president, he killed the president. He he not only kills multiple people throughout the course of the movie to up his score, which I guess is a necessity for his plan so that he can get to the president, but also
Yeah, like I think
after he is the
they don't really
president,
mention it.
yeah,
Yeah, they don't really mention it, but I think it's like it's not necessarily who comes in first. It's whoever docks up the most points, and coming in first just gets you a bunch. So that was the main thing. Of like, he had to at least keep it up a little bit. And I think the only other way they sort of try to blunt that edge is make it seem like Frankenstein's very kind of nihilistic about the situation, where it's like, I don't give a shit what, like, she has like a throwaway line of maybe the world doesn't want to be saved, and so he's pretty pessimistic about a lot of the people he's going after. Like, there's the scene where there's multiple scenes throughout this where like American citizens and everything are in some way either getting in front of people, like in front of the racers, or like putting other people in harm's way and that sort of thing. Like at one point there was like a euthanasia fucking thing where a hospital wheels out a bunch of elderly patients to just get hit by a car. So instead he runs through the doctors who put them out there and shit. So it's clear like he kind of just has this pessimistic view of this misanthropic view of people in general of like, listen, they're the ones out here. If they didn't want to get killed, they needed to not be here, but they clearly don't give a shit and they want this. So I shouldn't care anyway. And mainly it's just so he can just have an excuse to be able to enact his final plan. But even that's kind of mixed, since it's very have your cake and eat it too at times.
Right. Maybe they get off with that because for the most part he really does kill or target people that are kind of in on it or think they're above it, which like he later in the movie he mows down the priest, this religious figure that like oversees parts of the race. He kills that guy, which is like, okay, well that guy is like an officiator, and then they have to check the rules for, oh, he killed someone involved with the race, can you do that? And he, like you said, he mows down all those nurses, which I don't know. The old people seem to be fine with it, but they're also old and like sickly. So how much is it like, oh, you're going to be hit by a car instead of, like lethal injection or something? We're just going to put you in the middle of the road. This is probably going to be an extremely painful death. So maybe those nurses deserved it too. The only real... Oh, and at the end of the movie, which like you said in the synopsis, kind of undermines a bit of his point, he kills the character played by Don Steele, the radio host, who plays Junior, this like reporter for the race.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, he was involved too, so maybe the movie's like, no, we can do that, but it is at a point where it's like, you really shouldn't be killing people with your car.
Yeah, it's kind of mixed how they go about it, but at the same time, like, it's hard to have any lasting criticism about really either of these, because like I said at the beginning, these are very clearly parodies in their own right of mainly just like American spectacle and just kind of like sports spectacle in general. And in a way, like, it's kind of brilliant in both cases, which is weird, especially for the 2008 one, which is somehow more subtle than the fucking original. But it's just kind of like hard to really kind of give a shit about a lot of these wider, like these more nitpicky things, because it's like, oh, that would like the 75 one's like kind of, a parody of like the religious zeal that goes into shit like NASCAR. Because like, my God, have you even seen some of the stuff that goes on? Like bomber planes fly over, people with jetpacks and shit for like the opening ceremonies. It's insane.
I'm from the Midwest. I have been to more than one NASCAR race. Not necessarily, on my own or something that, I'm dying to go to, but I have been to those events.
Yeah. Yep. And this was a part of it, like a time, in the country, obviously this was the 70s. That's like, that was a big thing. Like very much like kind of like, also that was kind of the height of, when wrestling was kind of becoming a really big thing, and just kind of the amount of zeal that goes into shit like that. So it's clearly meant to be parodying that. And then the 2008 one comes in with like, it's a general parody of, the very violent nature of a lot of entertainment those days, like pay-per-view, like fights and everything. Like everything's got to be upping into how dark and gritty it is, and then also touching into abuses of the criminal justice system and privatized prisons and economic woes. It's like, it's not both of them aren't trying to do anything super deep with what they're saying, but what they do is very distinct and pretty well established with what they're doing. So it's hard not to like kind of appreciate them both for that. They truly go full balls to the wall in both cases.
What I will, I'll agree to that. In the case of the 2008 one, I think that all the comments and just I guess the general commentary that it has on the prison system and how we treat our prisoners and things like that, it's not necessarily a new concept, but I think they handle that very well. And that's probably the main commentary of the movie, because in terms of the the spectacle sort of it, like you said, the 75 one is very out and campy with what it's doing. In regards to like displaying this as a form of entertainment or media, I think that the 2008 one might be a little too subtle for me. Like I understood all the messages that it was trying to get across, and I really like the pay-per-view angle, especially, at the time that this came out. It just doesn't, for me, it doesn't feel like they do enough with that. Enough with the pay-per-view sort of style.
Yeah,
Like there's like one commercial, and then prior to every race, they like go through the individuals that have died, and then they all the living ones they have them appear on screen with the text in the background like K12. I just wish there was more of that for me.
yeah. I'd be hard pressed to necessarily know how they would go about it though, because like I feel like if they tried to delve a bit further into like that angle, like the 75 one definitely did, like all the different like interviews and stuff. Like they interview the now widow of the first person killed in the race, like the first like pedestrian victim, which is like insane, and I thought was fucking hilarious. I feel like if they leaned a bit too much into that with the new one, I think it would start falling into the area of like back into the area of like the tones kind of all over the place. I at least appreciate for the fact that like they stuck with it. That's meant to be a bit more closely just the journey of these characters with the kind of commentary kind of more relegated to the background. And so it kind of just creates a very human experience, weirdly enough. Whereas the 75 one definitely is specifically about that message, that spectacle, like that parody of spectacle. It's like it would be nice to have had a bit more, but I don't mind that they didn't. I think I would have just hated it more if they had kind of leaned any further into it, because then it's just been like, all right, yeah, we're just kind of going back into the thing of like, having these deep dramatic things and also, you know, getting into these like different like pay-per-view commercials and all the other things going on. Like I imagine they do like other commercials and shit and stuff that's going on in like other privatized prisons. Like maybe there's like a like American Gladiators thing, but like it's actual gladiators. And I think if that had happened, I would have just kind of been lost to it. I appreciate the level they had done with it.
And here's the thing. That's definitely a fine approach. I certainly see where you're coming from. I just think this is a level of difference of taste, because that shit you were just describing, I would be all in. It's like because I do like how ingrained it is into the 75 version and how campy they make it in relation to, we had a similar discussion and just difference of opinions on the RoboCop episode. I really like how the 87 film not only goes into ultra violence, but also just the state of media and, not just reporting, but there's constantly like commercials for these weird products. I really love dumb shit like that. And like The Running Man, the Schwarzenegger movie.
Oh yeah.
Is in like that's very reminiscent of something like this too, where it's like, it's like a big maze that this guy will try to make his way out of, and we have a couple of in-house celebrities that are gonna, try to blow his head off. I love stuff like that. But I get where you're coming from. I think that overall, it did. I think the 2008 one did a great job with the characters, even if I didn't appreciate it until much later in the movie, because I was invested. I didn't out and out hate anyone. Even Joe, who is kind of a despicable character in his own right, and straight up murders a guy that's actively trying to help him. I feel so bad for that man. Even I didn't like come away completely hating. I think this just goes back to a deeper rooted issue that I have, in that sort of gritty or more grimdark movies, it's hard for me to get into them. Which I think was one of my problems with the remake of RoboCop too.
Yeah, I think I definitely, and that's not to say I don't like things like RoboCop and obviously the 75 version. I think they're good for their time. They're good for what they're setting out to do. I definitely do still appreciate though like what they had going for like with the 2008 one, because like, it definitely seemed like if they tried to kind of lean too far into it, I think the tone would have just been a mess. Even more so than the 75 one, because the 75 one, it's kind of supposed to be a mess, it feels like, at the end of the day. Whereas this one definitely felt like it was meant to be much more grounded. But yeah, like some campiness would have been funny though. I did love that, like, and like to kind of go on your point with Joe and the 2008 version. There are moments of like in it where there's very subtle moments between really all of the characters where you have like little moments of humanity that I think are the things that sneak up on you, of realizing, oh wow, I actually give a shit about these characters. There's a scene near the end with Machine Gun Joe, like it's a running bit throughout it, like his navigators keep getting killed, like so he can't have like a female navigator because it makes people uncomfortable, because they get killed so often. There's a one at the very end where like they're escaping and you're thinking, oh, this navigator guy's gonna be able to get out, and then like his car gets shot up like with a bunch of bullets and the navigator gets like riddled, but Joe literally looks down at himself and is like, I didn't get hit. It was so funny of like, oh, this poor guy, like, what is this, just a thing that Joe can avoid?
Right. It's like, is this my fate?
Is this like, it's like the fucking, what is it? There's a line from I think it's Lord of War. It's I have the curse of invincibility. It's like something like that. I was like, oh, and it's like a very genuine reaction of like, how the fuck did he get killed and I didn't on that one? It was like, I really like that, really endeared me to him, or him to me, however that phrase works.
Yeah. No, I
it's shit like that throughout the whole movie, like with with Frankenstein's pit crew and everything. Like Coach, obviously, it's Ian McShane. He's basically like he's the cool mentor and like awesome dad all rolled into one. Just kind of having a casual quip at any kind of give and turn. That's not necessarily like annoying. Um, then like you have Gunnar, who has this whole thing of like is kind of like overhyping the cars. Like what's like he has this whole thing with like a cigarette lighter of kind of overhyping it, and which actually ends up becoming part of the plot because it actually helps them kill one of the other drivers later down the line. But then B also, it's just like it shows he's just got this like pretty fun personality. Even the list guy even comes in and like actually saves Jensen's life later on at the risk of himself. So it's like you actually end up giving a very real amount of shit about all these characters because they're actually done very well. They're not trying to do anything special with them, but they're done like human beings.
Right. And yeah, it's that level of relation, I think, that really drives a lot of it, because like I think that the characters are written well, and I think they have good dialogue and realistic interactions between one another that really sort of plays off of it, as too. It's yeah. I think that's the long and short of it, because there's a funny it's kind of funny comparing these two, because it's sort of like what you had said in your stinger. These are both commentaries. I think that on the one hand, the 2008 version is darker in that it's literally darker, as are a lot of films from that time. Either blues or grays or blacks or browns in the color scheme. But some of its themes are handled with such a deeper level, and they don't go as camp with it, so you feel the weight of it more, which generally makes it darker. On the other hand, I think if you're looking at it, literally in terms of like story beats and plot like that, I think that the 75 one has a leg up in terms of like how brutal it can be, because since it's being camp, since it is campy and in a lot of ways a comedy, they can get away with a lot more brutality, with the audience being able to stomach it, because it's so over the top, with heads flying off and people being crushed and widows being like celebrated on Ricky Lake style programs, that it's like the audience, if they did something like that in 2008, one, the tone would definitely clash. I see that. And two, the audience would probably be turned off, because this is supposed to be grounded, so the message might end up getting lost. It's like, ugh, we don't do that. This is sickening,
Yeah, it's like they at least, the very least, yeah, and that's what I was saying before, is like they each go off doing their own very specific thing, and they definitely stick to it. We've had movies that couldn't stick to their fucking tone. I mean, shit, look up fucking Truth About Charlie. But I at least like, I want to like the 75's message ultimately, and its tone, like an overall just vibe, in more than I do. But it's just like, it really just comes back to the characters of it all, because even when it feels like they're trying to have heart-to-heart moments between like Frankenstein and Griffith's character, Andy Smith, like there's a lot of moments where there's like this building romance thing, but it just feels more and more like a porno. And there's a lot of scenes where it's just got the fucking Frankenstein character having this dramatic beat with her while he is straight up just wearing a gimp suit. It's hard to look at. It's hard to look at, and it's like, it's the few moments in the movie that are meant to be taken at least a little seriously, because it's like, it's actually a very nuanced plan and like character that Frankenstein's got going on, but it's just like, it's hard to give a shit when that's what everyone's looking like throughout the whole thing. And also just their performances with each other are just like so over the top, like with the amount of TNA that's in this already. It's like, it really at times like, they definitely had a fucking porno cut of this, didn't they? And it's like, it was hard to watch at times. It was still entertaining. It was deeply entertaining. But just compared to the 2008 one, I just appreciate the 2008 one, what the 2008 one's doing just a tiny bit more. It's hard to put it into words specifically, but I think I just like subtleties more. And just, again, it's hard watching a dude in a gimp suit try to wax philosophically.
It's funny. That's something I haven't really touched on yet, so I want to go into that a bit. Is characters, because I know you brought it up. I kind of feel the same way for all the gushing that I've done about the 2008 characterizations and connecting with them and being for them. I don't feel that with most of the characters in the 75 version, but there are a couple of standouts, none of which are supposed to be the main the two main protagonists.
Right.
I agree, as stated before, about Calamity Jane, and I think she's engineered in a way to be the most sympathetic of the racers, and she's a lot of fun. She has a very fun bullfight sequence near the beginning of the movie as well, with this guy who I guess just wanted to be on camera.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise it's like, why are you out? This is dangerous. which, by the way, not to divulge too far from the point I just tried to make, but it's they actually do a pretty good job of explaining how these kills can be got, because most sane people are off of the road because they do not want to die. If they're out on the road, it's either they're doing their job, either as part of the city or state or part of the race itself, like the guys hanging up the banner, I think, might have been a part of some committee. Or they like want to be on camera, like the Chicken Gang, with Dick Miller, who apparently they do this stunt every year to avoid being hit by a car, but this year it doesn't go so well. Just people trying to get famous.
It's literally just playing chicken. It's like who can stay out on the road the longest.
And guess what? Doesn't work out for any of them this time.
Nope.
Yeah, so I like Calamity Jane. Thomasina Payne doesn't have a lot going on because she doesn't have to, but something about it's bizarre. She feels like she was plucked out of the 1800s, and it's just fun to listen to her talk and watch her walk around because it feels like she time traveled from a different movie.
She's very earnest, I will say that. Like, I fully expected that character by the end just to get kind of grating, but she is earnest in what she's doing and pulling off, so like I can definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, she's a lot of fun. And she gets her way at the end of the movie, so good for her. Good for her.
Even for shooting her great-granddaughter.
Yes, by accident. Oh, Lord.
I feel like the great-granddaughter should have been a little bitter about that. It's like, listen, I'm not putting you at this position because, like, you did shoot me. I know it was an accident, but still.
Oh dear, that would have been quite an ending to a movie. Just a prolonged conversation, like in like the chambers of the White House or whatever the White House is in the year 2000 in this movie. Just like, look, I know you want to put her on some sort of level of authority. She had a lot to do with the resistance, but this woman shot me a single time. It's not happening. I don't care if she is my grandmother. Lastly, a character I enjoyed and did not expect to enjoy. Not sympathetic in the least, but I really like Sylvester Stallone's character. Joe Viterbo?
Yeah, I gotta agree.
I was completely taken off guard because I'm not a big Stallone fan. I don't generally think that he's a great actor. He's good in Rocky. I feel like a lot of that is just the script, though. I don't tend to like him in his primary roles, especially once he gets into the, just action hero commando sort of deal. Well, not commando, literally, but like First Blood or whatever. I'm not a big fan of him in those. But in like a sort of secondary antagonist role, so early in his career, he's a lot of fun, and I think he's the funniest guy in the movie because he comes in at the start with all this bravado. This is going to be the year I beat Frankenstein. I'm going to win. We're rivals, but it's all up to me. And slowly throughout the course of the movie, he's less just an antagonist for Frankenstein, and he more turns into this he feels like Daffy Duck. He's like, why does no one give a shit about me? I'm out here doing my best, and no one cares. Where's my banner?
Yikes! And away, bam. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. He is very Daffy Duck by the end. He's kind of Daffy Duck at the beginning too, where he's just like firing off the Tommy gun and everything, trying to like make a spectacle of himself.
Yeah, he's like, this is my show. I own this. I like that it turns into like a little baby hissy match, and like his navigator, I don't remember what it is, but it's near the halfway point of the movie, and they're out on the road, and she says something really smarmy to him in the car because he's throwing a fit, and he looks at her and he's like, I hate this race and I hate you. And it just cuts away, and I was like, yeah, that's perfect. There's this one scene as well. This is just rehashing bits I love about the movie, but I think Stallone deserves his due. They're having sort of a conference now with one of the heads of the president's staff at one of these waypoints in the race, because now 2 of the racers have been killed. And everyone is like having this conversation about, we know that this isn't the French like the French, because that's a plot point. The French are out to get us. This isn't the French. This is the resistance, right? But the whole time, Stallone's character cannot be bothered with this discussion because there's this band playing obnoxious music off to the side, and he's like, would someone please just stop? This is really annoying. And the scene just ends with him walking away, picking up one of the violins and just bashing it to pieces on the back of his chair. He's energetic. He's a lot of fun. He might be my favorite character in the movie. He's
a astonishingly good comedic relief. Like he does a very good job. Like there's several comedic relief characters, but he does the most consistent job. Oh boy, yeah. The Machine Gun Joe in the 2008 one is like, I do like his character. I like that actor as well, just in general, but it's nowhere near that level.
No, yeah, it's definitely a different characterization, and like I said, I still cared for him. I like both of these Joes. Both of these Joes are good Joes in my book.
Yeah, fair enough.
I've gone through most of my notes at this point, and I think we both appreciate both of these, but I think we've made a pretty clear line in the sand of where we stand. The only thing that I want to bring up that I haven't touched on in my notes is, if I have to have a strong negative about the 75 Death Race 2000, I think the soundtrack is god-awful. It is
oh my God.
Horrible. It's annoying. Nothing fits.
It's like that weird sort of. It feels like the tracks they didn't want to use in the original fucking Italian Job.
Yes.
It just feels like it's so grating and annoying, like that kind of like 1950s esque kind of going into, well, not 1950s, but like that sort of like kind of new age 1950s going into the 70s, kind of very popular in England kind of style, jazzy sort of thing going on. It's bad.
And the thing is I didn't really notice it until there's a fight in the garage at one of the waypoints between Joe Viterbo and Frankenstein, where they're beating the shit out of each other. And the music, it's like this hootenanny thing that you would hear in like a western, like a southern bar, I would say,
Yeah.
but done with synth music. And I was like, one, this doesn't fit, and two, it is the most grating thing I think I've heard in months, probably. Even like, because I know I complained about The Truth About Charlie last episode and how its musical choices were all over the place. At least it was like competent music. It just didn't, like, none of the songs in that movie matched what was happening. This did both.
Yeah.
It was annoying and it didn't fit.
Honestly, the 2008 soundtrack was pretty decent, at least what it was going for. It wasn't necessarily good, but like it felt action packed. It felt like everything was very, well, high octane, for, no pun intended.
It was fine. I can't, outside of the like rap number that opens up the movie, sort of, I can't really think of a lot of the soundtracks, which is probably better. I'll you know what, screw probably. I'll say is better than 75, because at least it supplemented the movie.
It fits. It actually fucking fits.
It did its job. Yeah. I'll agree with that.
I think if I like, and then like to that point of like, if I had to think of like a distinct negative about the 2008 version, it doesn't really like end up doing anything major by the end. Like ultimately, like no move, like it doesn't have to be like this whole thing of like, oh, they upend the whole prison system and everything's changing. Now he's the president, yada yada yada. But like by the end of it, it just kind of feels like the movie ended when the writers and everything didn't really have any other grand ideas. Like they escaped, they get onto a freight train, they leave. Later, they have the kid, and then the love interest shows back up.
So her papers were approved.
It's like, okay, like despite like the fact that the person who was approving those papers got blown to fucking bits, which doesn't explain why she wasn't released earlier. But whatever. But I think that's probably it. There's just a lot of moments where it doesn't really feel like it has a deep desire to resolve a lot of shit. It just kind of wants it to have like, here's the story we have, here's the kind of general message we got going on in the background, and there, we're good.
I agree with that. And you kind of reminded me with the death of Hennessy. We don't have to stay on this topic for too long, but I really wanted to bring it up. I think Death Race 2008, for my faults with it, I think it works as a serviceable remake to the original movie. I
think it is a good remake.
Yeah. If you look up any comments from Paul Anderson on the movie, he does not view it as a remake. He views it as a prequel. That I buy way less. That does not really work for me.
No. This was like the original one was actually kind of more of like a Hunger Games situation, now that I actually think about it, which is weird to think about. Versus this is just like, privatization of prisons plus the popularity with pay-per-view violent shit. That's not really prequel territory there, bud.
Yeah, like the economy and whatever's collapsed in the original, and now we have like a new regime with a president who's really like a fascist dictator who's like overseeing everything. And this is a major sporting event across the country. But apparently this game actually started, if you want to view it as a prequel, it started in a prison system run by a woman who no longer exists. She is vapor in the air. And yeah, I don't really understand that line of thinking. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. I thought it was interesting that the director thought that at all.
I think if maybe they had leaned into that a bit harder, that may have been fun. But as it is, they really just make it feel like it's a very localized thing as it is. Like, yeah, it just kind of gives you the view of a world where like shit's just not great. And the fact that like kind of wanton violence is a bit more popular. And like you could kind of make the stretch of like, yeah, maybe that eventually expands into this version of reality where it's like a fascist dictatorship, or I say fascist, it's just totalitarian in general. It doesn't really get specific. But it's just, it doesn't quite gel right. I think considering it on its own is probably for the best.
Yeah, and yeah, I think it works better that way anyways.
But yeah, but yeah, like you said, I think we've pretty firmly established where we stand on it. I do like the 75 one. It surprised me. I will say it surprised me a lot, and it definitely does more with what it's going for than the 2008 version. But I just like the humanity that's on display with the 2008 one, which is so weird to say for fucking 2008 Death Race with Jason Statham. Jesus Christ. But it's like the characters are endearing. I was entertained by watching them. I wanted them to succeed. There are a lot of movies that try a lot more shit that don't succeed at that. There's so many movies where I'm just like, I don't give a shit about any of these characters. I don't care what happens to any of them. I mean, well, this one's like, here's a movie about dark fucking bullshit visuals and blood and splatters and explosions, and these characters are infinitely more human and likable than most of certain companies' movies. yeah, like I by the end of it, I enjoyed myself, and I would have watched it again, and I have watched it multiple times in my life. It's a good movie. I'd watch the 75 one again, but probably not many times. I think at a certain point it'd probably get grating, music especially. But the 2001 I could see myself seeing again. It doesn't do anything huge with itself, and to that end, doesn't make it easy to fucking get tired of.
I think in general, okay, well, coming out of this, mark off your bingo cards, Jacob stumbles around his fucking words. Death Race 2000 is my favorite of the two of these. Part of that can be lent to the campy 70s-ness of it all, which I've constantly said that's got to be my favorite decade for movies at this point. So I definitely appreciate it, and I buy into its message. That's not to say that I not only don't like the 2008 one, but that I think it's a good movie that's well made. Just at the end of the day, I don't know that I'd watch it again because I don't think it's for me. And that's sort of been the ongoing theme with this show, is I think that around the 2000s, especially near 2010, those type of action and sci-fi movies just generally are not for me. And that's fine, And
that's usually when they kind of open up for me. And I've never really been the type to say I have a particularly favorite decade. My favorite decade for movies is usually the one I'm in, because it's like I always see like there's usually improvements with, like a lot of exceptions, obviously. But I tend to be more a fan of contemporary stuff just in general, just because at a certain point, older stuff I tend to just get bored of faster. Just because it's like, okay, I've seen this concept done, but with higher quality equipment at the very least. So it kind of loses me sometimes.
Which is understandable. Like you can, especially when you get into more snobby film people, it's more of a suspension of disbelief, and you have to appreciate it for the time it's in. But I think it has to work on its own before you can even begin to consider factors like that. Like I've constantly said, I appreciate, I can play video games going back to the 8-bit era and things like that, if they're made well, but something like Ocarina of Time, I just don't find fun. It's not always about the techniques and everything. If the core of the film's not there, then why even bother? And I think that's a real driving force behind boredom, especially pacing and tone, which have evolved over time. But yeah.
I like new shit. I try not to, I so many fucking film snobs at this point. A lot of it's almost out of spite, where it's just like, these film snobs deciding, you know what, like, oh, this like fucking the original, like you like the two of us, the original, like The Devil and Daniel Webster, like we liked the remake more because it's like the original was dull as dirt. I have no shame of that. I don't care. I know the remake's silly and over the top and stupid, but you know what? It's better than boring.
That's true. If anything, I guess my thought in that when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I did prefer that movie. It's not good. It's just because I didn't think either were good, so it's like the lesser of two evils.
Oh, yeah, neither was good. Neither was good. Yeah, not good at all. Yeah, look at me fucking liking the 2000 like a Jason Statham movie. My goodness gracious.
Did you ever think you would see the day?
I mean, probably. I mean, I already knew I liked the movie, before we did the episode, but I didn't know whether or not I liked it more. I think I've camped and or darked myself out of this whole situation. If there's any socials to be said.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, that's something that we do. Go ahead and follow us on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. We are on a ton of them: Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Podbay, Podomatic, Stitcher, YouTube. Obviously, I put the videos up on there. We're hosted on Anchor. Thank you, Anchor. And you can also listen to episodes there as well. It doubles as a studio for hosting and for listening. Go ahead and, leave reviews, comment, favorite, whatever you want to do, and visit like it's a place to go. Send an email to theyremadeit@gmail.com with suggestions for future episodes. If you just want to talk, improvements, positives, negatives, anything you want. And finally, at It Remade on Twitter, where we have news about when new podcasts are going live, little promo arts and posters for things we've been talking about recently, what we've been watching, playing, doing just in general, and full circle diagrams that I've been putting together for people we've covered on the show more than once. And I think that's it for socials.
Oh, good. Thank goodness. Social anxiety is never fun during this portion.
Oh, yeah. You just hearing the names of some of those things, I'm sure sends a chill down your spine.
It's a very specific form of social anxiety. I hear the names of like social like websites and everything, and I have a slight clench up, not unlike an allergy.
I understand completely. My sinuses get blocked, and I get a splitting migraine headache every time I even hear Twitter uttered.
That's for its own reasons.
Yeah, definitely.
That's because it's Twitter.
But hey, no shame if you use it, because we got an account there. So
hey, yeah, I'll hate on it, but hey, if you want to still see it,
yeah,
please justify our existence.
I want validation on the internet.
There's no greater drug in this world.
I said 2 likes, I'm E-famous.
Hey, well, cheers to E-fame. As always, I am your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
Give us those likes. Give us the retweets or blogs or... I don't know. I'm old. I don't give a shit about this stuff.
get my hands on him, I'll rip his heart out. I mean it. I'm sick of this race and I'm sick of you.